Have you ever felt like something inside of you isn't really you? Like there's a voice, a thought, an impulse that drags you somewhere you don't want to go, and no matter how hard you fight, you can't break free? Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized the person staring back at you? You are not alone. What you feel has a name, and what you need has an answer. But that answer didn't come from a philosopher or a doctor or a counselor. It came from a muddy shoreline, at the break of dawn, in a forgotten land called Gadara. And what happened there that morning changed forever the understanding of the invisible world that surrounds us. Stay with me, because this story is not just about a man in antiquity. It is your story. It is the story of every human being who has ever felt that something greater than themselves is consuming them from the inside out. The Sea of Galilee slept beneath a thick darkness that night. There was no moon, only the sound of water lapping softly against the sides of the boat, and the north wind carrying the smell of wet earth and cold stone. Jesus sat at the stern, eyes closed, breathing deeply. The disciples rowed in silence. They had crossed that lake many times before, but that crossing felt different. Something in the air, something none of them could name just yet. Peter stared into the dark horizon with that instinct only men who've spent years on the water ever develop. He knew every whim of the lake, every shift of wind, every sign of a coming storm. But what he felt that night did not come from the sky or the water. Came from within, a pressure in his chest, a feeling that they were moving toward something that reached far beyond the other shore. No one spoke for hours, and then, when the bow grazed the dark sand of the shore of the Gadarenes, and the men jumped into the cold water to drag the boat onto land, something shattered the silence of that night like thunder without lightning. A scream, a howl that didn't sound human, coming from the hills, bouncing off the tombs carved into the rock. A sound that made the disciples freeze, standing knee-deep in water, staring at each other with wide-open eyes. Think about it for a moment. You are in total darkness. You have just crossed a lake in silence. And suddenly, from the shadows of the burial caves, you hear a cry that does not belong to this world. What would your body do? What would your heart do? But Jesus did not step back. He stood on the wet shore, looking toward the darkness of the hills, with a calm that no human being could manufacture. A calm that was not indifference, but authority. The same authority with which he had stilled the wind the night before when the storm threatened to sink the boat. The same authority that had lived in him before time itself existed. And from among the tombs the man came running toward him. He was a man, or what remained of one. No one remembered his name anymore. It had been too long since the chains had replaced it. Too long since screams had taken the place of his voice. The people of the region had learned not to speak his name, because to speak it meant remembering that he had once been someone. A neighbor, a human being with a history, with dreams, with a mother who had loved him. Now he lived among the dead, in the caverns carved into the rock where bodies were laid to rest. Without clothes, without a home, without an identity. His body was covered in scars, some old and already closed, others recent and still open. He had made them himself. In the moments when the darkness that lived inside him drove him against the rocks, against the sharp edges of stone. And he could not stop it. He could not make it stop, because what lived inside him was stronger than his own will. The men of the village had tried everything. Ropes, iron chains. They had bound him hand and foot with the thickest they had, and he had broken them, effortlessly, with a strength that was not his, a strength that frightened, because it came from something no one could see or touch or understand. So they had simply left him, exiled him to the tombs, to the place of the dead, as if by removing him from the living they had solved the problem, as if hiding the pain were the same thing as healing it. How many times do we do the same? How many times do we push what hurts us to the edges of our lives, lock it away in the caverns of our heart, hoping that if we don't look at it, it will disappear? But pain that is not faced does not disappear. It settles in, deepens, and with time it stops being something we feel and becomes something we are. That man had reached that point. He no longer knew where he ended and where what possessed him began. There was no longer a line, no longer a border. It was as if his original identity had been devoured by layer upon layer of darkness, until what remained was barely a shadow of who he had once been. And yet he ran toward Jesus. Stop for a moment here, because this detail changes everything. This man, possessed by a legion of demons, who broke iron chains with his bare hands, who lived terrifying the dead of night, who cut himself with stones in the darkness. This man ran toward Jesus. He did not flee. He did not attack. He ran toward him and fell at his feet. Why? Because even beneath all those layers of darkness, even buried under the weight of what inhabited him, there was still a part of that man that recognized the light. There is something in the human soul that cannot be completely destroyed. Something that, no matter how deep the pit, no matter how dark the night, keeps looking upward, keeps hungering for freedom, keeps recognizing, even if only in a whisper, that it was made for something different. That part of him ran toward Jesus, and that same part lives inside of you. When he fell prostrate before him, a voice came out of his mouth. But it was not his voice. It was something more, something ancient, something multiple, something that recognized perfectly who stood before it and was terrified. What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me. Listen to those words carefully, because they say far more than they appear to at first glance. What inhabited that man recognized Jesus before he had spoken a single word, called him Son of the Most High God, not teacher, not prophet, not rabbi, called him by what he was, and it begged, pleaded, it asked for mercy. What has no mercy begged for mercy? What sows terror had terror. What destroys found itself face to face with the only one who can destroy it. Jesus asked, "What is your name?" And the answer came with a terrifying honesty. "My name is Legion, for we are many." Legion, a Roman word, a word of war. A Roman legion numbered between 3,000 and 6,000 soldiers. It was the symbol of power, of occupation, of the force that crushes. And that word, spoken through the mouth of what inhabited that man, tells us something we need to understand. The enemy does not come alone. He comes in mass. He comes organized. He comes with a strategy. This is not a minor discomfort. It is not a rough patch. It is an occupation. And the soul of that man had been occupied. But here is the key. Here is what the biblical narrative reveals with a clarity that makes you tremble. What called itself Legion, what broke iron chains, what made the bravest men in the village back away, that entire army of darkness that lived inside that man fell at the feet of Jesus and begged. It did not challenge him. It did not fight. It did not try to escape. It begged. Because in the hierarchy of the spiritual universe, there is an authority that stands above all authority. There is a name before which every knee bows. Not metaphorically, literally. What came to destroy the man bowed before the one who came to save him. And in that moment, on that dark shore, at the break of dawn, beside the Sea of Galilee, something was revealed that the modern world has forgotten. The real battle does not take place in parliaments or markets or battlefields. The real battle is invisible. It takes place in the soul of every human being. And there are forces that want to occupy that territory. Forces that know exactly how to do it, that know your weaknesses better than you know them yourself, that know which thoughts to plant at 3 in the morning when you cannot sleep, that know which wounds to reopen which fears to activate, which lies to make you believe. But there is also an authority that can drive them out. One voice alone, one name alone. And while Jesus stood on that shore, he did not need to prepare himself. He did not need to perform a ritual. He did not need to consult anyone or gather strength. He simply spoke, with the same ease with which a king speaks to his subjects, with the same certainty with which the sun rises every morning. And what inhabited that man knew there was no negotiation possible. Only one last plea. Nearby, a large herd of pigs was feeding on the hillside. What called itself Legion begged not to be sent out of the region. It asked to be allowed to enter the pigs, and Jesus permitted it. In an instant, 2,000 pigs rushed down the steep bank and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled. They ran to the town. They told what they had seen, and the people came out. They came to see, and what they found left them speechless. The man who had terrorized the region for years, the man who broke chains, who screamed through the night, who lived among the dead cutting his own flesh, was sitting, clothed, in his right mind, at the feet of Jesus, clothed, in his right mind. 3 words that, in that context, are the most powerful in the universe. Because clothing is not just fabric. It is identity. It is dignity. It is the declaration that you are someone, that you have worth, that you deserve to be covered, to be cared for, to be protected. And sanity is not merely a mental state. It is the recovery of the self. It is returning to who you were before the darkness stole you. It is remembering your name. It is recognizing yourself in the mirror, sitting, clothed, in his right mind. That is how Jesus gives a man back to himself. Not halfway, not partially, complete, restored, with identity, with dignity, with a sound mind. And what was the reaction of the townspeople? They were afraid, and they begged Jesus to leave their region. And here is something that hurts more than it appears to. Here is one of the darkest realities of the human condition. The townspeople saw the transformation. They saw the man they had known turned into someone new. They saw the miracle with their own eyes. And they were afraid, not of the evil that had been cast out, but of the good that had just taken place. Why? Because the miracle had cost 2,000 pigs. Because the freedom of one man came with an economic price. And they preferred the cost of his slavery to the discomfort of his freedom. This is not just a story from the 1st century. This happens today. It happens in families where someone begins to change and the others receive it with suspicion. It happens in communities where the transformation of one person threatens the system of how things have always been. It happens inside us when change frightens us more than staying the same. There is something in human beings that prefers familiar chaos to unfamiliar order. That prefers the chain it knows to the uncertain freedom it doesn't. That, when it sees Jesus do the impossible instead of running toward him, asks him to leave. Because if he stays, things will have to change. The pigs will have to go. There will have to be an acceptance that economics is not the highest priority. There will have to be a recognition that something exists that is greater than money, more valuable than business, more urgent than material loss. And that is too much for some hearts. Jesus got back into the boat. And the free man, the one who had been legion, the one who had lived among the dead, ran toward the shore. He begged Jesus to let him go with him. And this request, so human, so understandable, contains all the gratitude that can fit inside a restored soul. He wanted to stay close to the one who had brought him back. He wanted never to move away from that presence that had returned him to himself. But Jesus told him no. And what he said instead is one of the most powerful commissions recorded in the Gospels. He didn't tell him to study theology. He didn't tell him to join the group of disciples. He didn't tell him to fast or pray for 40 days. He said, Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion on you. Go home, not to Jerusalem, not to the temple, not to the great religious centers. Home, to the place where people know you, to the place where they know who you used to be, to the place where your story is no secret, where you cannot pretend to be what you are not, where transformation has no excuses and no stage props. Go home, because the most powerful testimony is not the one given before unknown crowds. It is the one given before the people who watched you fall, before those who remembered your screams in the night, before those who had given up hope of ever seeing you free, before those who closed the door of their hearts to you because they simply didn't know what else to do with you, to walk up to that door, to knock, and when it opens, to show them in your face, in the way you carry yourself, in your eyes, in your voice, what God can do. That is testimony. And the man went, and he began to proclaim in Decapolis, which was a region of 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And all marveled. One man, one story, 10 cities. No marketing army can do that. No advertising campaign carries that power. Only a man who went to hell and came back, and who had the courage to tell about it. Now I want to speak directly to you, because this story did not end on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. This story is still going. It is going on right now in millions of lives all over the world, and very possibly in yours. Maybe you are not living among tombs. Maybe you don't break iron chains. But maybe there is something inside you that you sense is not really you. A thought that returns over and over no matter how hard you try to stop it. A behavior you keep repeating even though you swore you wouldn't go back there. A fear that paralyzes you at the most important moments. An inner voice that tells you that you are worthless, that you cannot change, that you will never be different, that you are too broken to be restored. That is not your voice. That is what darkness does. Plants its words so deep inside you that they start to sound like your own thoughts. It speaks to you in your own voice. Convinces you that what you feel is what you are. It tells you that this is your identity, that you were born this way, that you will die this way. But Jesus crossed the lake in darkness, in a moonless night, toward a land full of tombs, to find one single man that no one else wanted to touch. Not to give him a lecture, not to hand him a list of advice, but to speak one word of authority and give the man back to himself. And that same Jesus knows your name. He knows your story. He knows the chains you broke and the ones that broke you. He knows the years you have spent living among the dead, in a place that is not home but that you have learned to call home because you don't know any other. And he comes. He crosses the lake. He arrives at your shore. The question is not whether he can. The question is whether you will run toward him or whether you will ask him to leave. There is a decision that no one can make for you. Just one. The decision to open the door of your heart to the only one who has authority over what has you imprisoned. Not the authority of those who shout the loudest. Not the authority of those who threaten the most. The authority of the one who created the soul and knows every corner of it. The authority of the one who can look an entire legion in the eye and say, "Come out," and they obey. Think for a moment about what you are carrying today. Not what you show the world, what you are actually carrying. In silence, in the darkness of the night when the world is asleep and you cannot be. That weight you have learned to conceal but that never fully goes away. That wound you believe should have healed by now but that keeps bleeding in the most unexpected moments. What would your life look like if that were gone? What would your tomorrow look like if you could wake up without that weight? What would your relationships with the people you love look like if what is destroying you on the inside stopped destroying them too? These are not rhetorical questions. I am inviting you to imagine what God already imagined for you before you were born. I am showing you that the man of Gadara was not an exception. He was an example. An example of what God does when He is permitted to enter the places no one else wants to go. There is something more in this story that you need to see. Something hidden in the smallest detail that contains an enormous truth. When the townspeople arrived and saw the man sitting, clothed in his right mind, the Bible says they were afraid. But nowhere does it say the man was afraid. The one who should have been most shaken was him. The one who had just experienced the expulsion of a legion of spirits, who had just passed through the most violent spiritual upheaval imaginable, was him. And yet he was sitting, peace, at the feet of Jesus. The presence of Jesus does not only drive out what destroys you, it installs something in its place. It installs a peace that cannot be manufactured, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that can sit on the shoreline after having crossed through hell and need no explanation because everything is well, everything is whole, everything is right. Paul described it centuries later in a letter written from prison, of all places, as a peace that surpasses all understanding. A peace that does not come from everything being fine on the outside. It comes from something being resolved on the inside. And once that happens, what is on the outside loses the power it once had. There are people today who are looking for that peace in all the wrong places. In the approval of others. In professional success. In relationships that temporarily fill the emptiness but cannot reach the bottom of what is really hurting. In the constant noise that avoids silence, because in the silence what we don't want to face comes up. But the peace you are looking for is not in any of those places. It is in the same presence that caused a man who broke iron chains to sit calmly on a shoreline at dawn, watching the lake, needing nothing more. I want you to think about the name the Legion used to identify itself. My name is Legion, for we are many. There is a strategy in that multiplicity. The enemy of the soul does not work with a single lie. He works with a system of lies that reinforce each other. One lie says you are worthless. Another says you will never change. Another says God does not hear you. Another says that what you feel is the final reality. Another says it is already too late. Another says you are different from everyone else, that what works for others will never work for you. Another says you have too many flaws to ever be restored. And all together they form a narrative that installs itself so deep it begins to sound like truth. But not one of those voices gets to define your identity. Not one of those voices has authority over your soul. Not one of those voices can withstand a single word spoken by the same one who spoke the words that brought the universe into existence. And that word wants to be spoken over you, today, in this moment. But it requires something from you. Not merit, not perfection, not having resolved everything before you approach. Only what the man of Gadara did. Run. On your knees if you have to. Desperate if that is where you are, without a prepared speech, without the right religious vocabulary, without knowing exactly what to say. Just run toward the only shore where freedom is possible. The story of Gadara also reveals something about the pigs. And I know it sounds like a secondary detail, but it is not. The pigs were the price of one man's freedom. And the townspeople chose to mourn the pigs rather than celebrate the man. They placed the economic cost above the human value. They placed their material loss above the spiritual gain of someone who had been in hell for years. This confronts us with a question that each of us must answer at some point in life. What matters more to me? The pigs or the man? The possessions or the people? Comfort or real transformation? The status quo or actual freedom? Because Jesus comes to do miracles. But miracles cost something. Not in terms of you deserving them. They cost you in terms of letting go. Letting go of control. Letting go of the narrative you have built about who you are and why you are this way. Letting go of the pigs. The systems you know even though they are destroying you. the ways of living that no longer serve you but that are at least familiar. And sometimes, when Jesus does that, when he takes the pigs and sends them over the cliff to free the man, there is a part of us that feels the loss before it feels the gain. There is a part of us that grieves what is gone before it celebrates what has arrived. That is the transition. That is the hardest moment. When you are no longer who you were, but you have not yet fully discovered who you are now. When the pigs are gone and the free man is standing there but still needs to learn how to live without chains. Because learning to live without chains also takes time. The man of Gadara had spent years in bondage. He had developed an entire way of existing inside that prison. And suddenly he was free. That freedom is a gift. But it is also new territory that must be learned to inhabit. And Jesus knows this. That is why he said, "Go home. Don't go do great things just yet. Don't try to conquer the world this afternoon. Go to what you know, to your people, to the small, and from there, tell what happened." Faithfulness in small things is the training ground for great things. Testimony at home is the preparation for 10 cities. The man who was first faithful to speak to his family ended up proclaiming across all of Decapolis. But he started at home. What is your home today? What is the small place where your transformation can be a testimony? Maybe it is a conversation with someone you think will not understand. Maybe it is acknowledging in front of someone that you used to be one way and now you are different. Maybe it is stopping hiding what God has done in you because you fear the judgment or the disbelief of others. The man of Gadara had no guarantees that anyone would believe him. In fact, many probably thought he was crazy or a fraud. They had known him living among the tombs. They had seen him break chains. Who was going to believe that this same man was now sitting calmly on a shore, talking quietly about a Galilean teacher? But he went anyway, and all marveled. The faith that acts in the absence of guarantees is the most powerful faith of all. Not the faith that waits until everyone is convinced before it moves. Not the faith that requires perfect conditions before it speaks. The faith that goes even while trembling. That testifies even without knowing exactly how to explain it. That says, "I don't understand everything that happened, but I know that before I was one way and now I am another. And that cannot be the product of my own willpower, because my willpower was not enough to free me on its own during all those years." That is testimony, and it carries a power that cannot be measured. Now let me speak to you about the shores. Because in this story there are two shores and both of them matter. The first shore is where the disciples set out from. It is the familiar side. The side of the lake where the community is, where the synagogue is, where the miracles people want to see are happening. It is the comfortable side. The side where Jesus is already welcomed. The second shore is Gadara. The side of the Gentiles. The side of the unclean. The side where the pigs and the tombs and the possessed man are. The side that no rabbi would bother crossing to, because it is not worth the effort. Because they are pagans. Because they are outside the covenant. Because their lives are too complicated and too dark to deserve a visit. And Jesus crossed anyway, at night, without anyone asking him to. Without the man of Gadara even being able to ask, because the man of Gadara was in no condition to ask for anything. Jesus crossed because he knew there was someone on the other side who needed him. That there was no one else who would go. That if he didn't go, no one would. What is your Gadara? Not the geographical place. The place inside your soul. The side of yourself that no one visits because it is too dark, too complicated, too shameful, too painful. The corner you have sealed because you believe that if God saw it, he would step back. He has already seen it. He crossed the lake at night to get there. And he did not step back. He arrived. And he asked, "What is your name?" Not to diagnose you. Not to classify you. To meet you where you are. To let you know that before you speak, before you explain, before you justify yourself, you are already in the presence of the one who can change everything. And in that question, what is your name? There is an invitation that goes far beyond words. It is the invitation to be known, truly known, not the version you present to the world, not the version you show on social media or at church or at work. You, the real you, the one who cries alone at midnight, the one who is afraid that if people knew who you really are, they would reject you. The one who has spent years pretending everything is fine when on the inside there is a war that never ends. That you. Jesus is asking about that you. And when you answer, he will not judge you. He will not step back. He will not change the subject or hand you a list of Bible verses to fix it yourself. He will speak with authority, with the authority that puts armies of darkness to flight and returns the man to himself. I want you to consider something before we close, something that perhaps no one has ever told you quite this way. The man of Gadara was the first person in the Gospels to receive a personal mission. Before the 12 disciples in Matthew 28, before the great final commission, this man, this one who had been considered subhuman, this one who lived among the dead, this one that no one wanted to touch, was the first to receive a direct personal commission from Jesus. Go and tell. It did not go to the Pharisees. It did not go to the chief priests. It did not go to the scholars of the law. It went to a naked man among the tombs. And Jesus clothed him and sent him. This tells us something about how God chooses his messengers. He does not choose those who are already spotless. He does not choose those who never fell. He does not choose those with the longest spiritual resume. He chooses those with the most powerful story, those who went to the bottom and came back, those who can stand before someone who is in hell and say, I was there too, and look where I am now. That testimony does not belong to those who never suffered. It does not belong to those who never went to the tombs. It belongs to those who were set free, to those who know the weight of chains and also know the weight of the grace that broke them. Your story, no matter how dark it has been or still is, does not disqualify you, prepares you. If today you are in the chains, this story is for you. If today you are on the other side and you have gone a long time without telling what God did in you, this story is for you too. If today you are one of the townspeople who saw the miracle and was afraid and asked Jesus to leave because the transformation was too costly, this story is for you as well. We are all one of the characters in this story at some point in our lives. And Jesus keeps crossing the lake. He keeps arriving at dark shores. He keeps asking, what is your name? He keeps speaking with authority. He keeps giving the man back to himself. The question is the same one the inhabitants of Gadara faced, the same one the man who ran toward him faced. Will you run toward him, or will you ask him to leave? There is a difference between knowing this story and letting this story change you. You can hear it, feel moved, and tomorrow be exactly the same. Or you can do something that perhaps you have never done with this story before. Internalize it. Carry it with you. Let it ask you the questions it needs to ask. What is my legion? What is it that speaks in my voice but is not me? What chains am I still wearing even though they are no longer made of iron? What Gadara in my heart have I told Jesus not to enter because I am afraid of what the cleaning will cost? What pigs am I protecting that are keeping someone from being free? And the most important question of all, who do I need to go tell about what God has done in me? Because if you are honest, if any part of this story resonates in you, if there is any mirror in these characters that shows you something you have been denying for a long time, then you already know the answer. You already know who this story is addressed to. It is addressed to you, not to those who have everything figured out. To you, with your specific story, with your name, with your legion, with your dark shore, with your sleepless 3 a.m., with your visible and invisible scars, with everything you are and everything you have been. Jesus came to Gadara in the darkness, with no moon, with no advance warning, with no invitation from anyone, because he knew there was someone who needed to be found. And he has come all the way here, to this moment, to this story, to these words, because he knows there is someone who needs to hear them. That someone is you. And if in this moment you feel something you cannot entirely explain, something moving in your chest, something making your eyes well up even though you don't want them to, something making these words feel more personal than they should, do not rationalize it. Do not shut it down. Do not tell yourself it is just emotion. It may be the beginning of your crossing to the other shore. It may be Jesus arriving at Gadara. If you are ready to stop living among the dead, if you are tired of the weight of the chains you carry, if there is something in you that still remembers what you were made for even though you haven't felt it in a long time, then do what the man did. Run. It does not matter how you arrive. It does not matter if you come well-dressed or completely broken. It does not matter if you have the right words or if all you can do is fall to your knees and say, "Here I am. This is where I am. And I need this to change." That is enough. It has always been enough. And if you want to pray, if you want to use words to open that door, you can speak these from the deepest place inside you. Lord Jesus, you who crossed the lake in darkness to reach one man, cross now to where I am. I don't know how to name everything that has me bound. I don't know how to explain everything I am carrying. But you know, you see what no one else sees. You go where no one else goes. Come to my Gadara. Speak with your authority over what has me imprisoned. Give me back to myself. Clothe me with the dignity that was taken from me or that I threw away. Restore my name. Restore my mind. Give me back the peace I cannot find anywhere else. And when you have done it, give me the courage to go home and tell what you did. Let my story be a testimony. Let my freedom be a seed. Let what you do in me reach others who are also living among the dead, waiting for someone to come. Let that someone be me. Let the one who was rescued become the one who rescues, just as you did for me. Amen. If the story touched something in you, don't let it pass. Share it with someone who needs it, with someone who is on their own dark shore, with someone who has been living among the tombs for a long time and no longer knows how to get out. Your act of sharing could be someone else's crossing of the lake. And if you want to leave something in the comments, write the word free, just that word, as a declaration, as an act of faith, as the first step of a man who ran toward Jesus in the darkness and arrived at the other shore sitting, clothed, and in his right mind. Free.